Since the 1980s, I've been a proponent of the less is more philosophy when it comes to hi-fi amplifiers. And by that I mean I've consistently chosen modern hi-fi gear with shorter signal paths, no tone or loudness controls or filters or speaker selector switches or EQs. And typically they feature just 3 or 4 analog inputs and no DAC and one set of speaker binding posts. In this video, however, I'm excited to share my experience with a unique and extraordinary hi-fi component I've been using for a couple of months. Now, this unit is certainly not about less is more. In fact, it embodies the idea that more is more. It's the Advanced Paris A12 Classic Integrated Amplifier. You've probably never heard of Advanced Paris unless you live in France or other parts of Europe. I hadn't either until last autumn when I encountered one of their amplifiers at the Capital Audio Fest. What makes the Advanced Paris A12 Classic unique and extraordinary, you may ask? Well, first, you'll notice its impressive size. It's substantial in all dimensions. Next, you'll be drawn to the prominent meters and orangey red glowing tubes visible through a small window on the front. And it gives it a bit of a McIntoshy vibe, but more on that later. Now, despite these standout features, the design remains quite minimalistic. The A12 is rated at 190 watts per channel into 8 ohms, 280 into 4 ohms, and that's a Class AB circuit, not Class D. I usually don't spend much time detailing the back of or the business side of a component, but that's where the A12 truly astonished me. Now here we have connections for 2 sets of stereo speakers, or 2 zones. And that's kind of old school. Then, starting at the top, there are 2 digital HDMI inputs, audio only and HDMI ARC for connecting to a TV. And there are trigger out sockets to automatically switch on an external device like a subwoofer or amplifier. And then we have 3 USB input connections, one for firmware updates, the second for an external digital audio player, and the third to connect to a computer or streamer. To the right of those are 8 more digital inputs. Yes, 8. 3 coaxial, 3 Toslink, and 1 AES connection. And there's also connection for an optional external Bluetooth receiver. So counting the 2 HDMI and 2 USB, this baby has 12 digital inputs. Now moving down, there are a row of analog XLR balance sockets, a set of pre-outs to an external amplifier, and 2 sets of inputs. Now here's something interesting. Vertically arranged to the right are 2 pairs of switches connected to the 2 headphone jacks on the front. Using these switches, you can adjust the impedance and gain for each headphone jack. Then below the air vents, there's some more goodies. I see a small bias switch to increase the amplifier's bias to enable it to operate more in Class A mode. Then moving to the right, we see 2 subwoofer outputs and 2 bass management switches, one for each. Extraordinary. And then shifting over, we see the rows of analog inputs and outputs, amp in and preamp outs for flexibility. There's also a fixed record output. There are 4 sets of auxiliary and 1 CD input. And then we have a phono input. And it's not the usual moving magnet phono stage, but rather one that can also handle moving coil cartridges. And the bottom switch allows you to choose between moving magnet or high or low gain moving coil. And then there's capacitance settings, which I've rarely seen in phono stages, but I believe this setting affects mostly moving magnet cartridges. I mean, I could be wrong, but let me know. Lastly, On the left is the power switch, power socket, and the voltage selector that's covered up. But hold on a sec. Looking at the front panel again, I notice that they have deliberately separated its analog and digital functions. The knob on the right handles the digital inputs, while the one on the left is for analog inputs. And the center knob serves two functions, primarily as the volume control. But when you press it, it allows access to other functions and settings. Now the manual covers all those details, so I won't delve into that. There's plenty more interesting stuff to discuss. Now let's pop the hood and take a look inside. Well, after I take the cover off, I think the interior of this amplifier is quite striking with the black and the red and the bold Advanced Paris name on it here. It's facing this way. Now, from what I could see, these are the two toroidal transformers. And we have two banks of heat sinks here for the outputs. Looks like this is the HDMI board because it's right where the HDMI is. And this looks like the digital board here. And this is the preamp board, I believe, because it's right behind the tubes. And underneath, that must be the analog power section. A lot going on underneath here. This has got several layers. There's a big capacitors there. A whole lot of capacitors down underneath there. Anyways, a lot of engineering going on in here, obviously. So these are kind of boards that are linking the digital or what's going on back here to the front panel. And this preamp section is connected down here. The phono board is either this or this down there. You tell me. Interestingly, there is no built-in streamer, no Wi-Fi, no AirPlay 2, and no phone app to control it, but there is a big glossy plastic remote. Now, along with all those digital inputs, there must be a built-in DAC, right? Well, yes, that's interesting as well. It has an old Burr Brown PCM 1796 chip, now branded as Texas Instruments. Why would Advanced Paris choose a 20-year-old DAC chip for the modern A12 instead of a more recent ESS or AKM chip? I don't think it's the price. I believe it's because those old chips are considered classics now. Those glowing tubes are part of the preamp stage, a pair of 12 AT7s that are inside there. And I'm all for tubes in the signal path. I appreciate a good tube preamp. And I've connected the A12 to my desk system with the ProAct Response 2.5s and my other system with the Magnapan 1.6Xs. And for both systems, I use the internal DAC and the phono stage rather than my separate components. And what do you have to pay for all this goodness? Well, the MSRP is $37.99 US. I decided to do some A/B comparisons with the Bryston amp and the Air Acoustics preamp and Hollow Audio DAC, and paired with my Magnapan loudspeakers. I've lived with this setup for a couple of years, and I enjoy its punchy, tight, articulate neutrality. I tested two digital streaming sources through the A12's internal DAC, a WIM Mini and an Eversolo DMP A6. Now the WIM Mini functions well and it's an amazing value at under $100, but the stream from the Ever Solo sounded significantly better to me. The WIM Mini was rather dull and lackluster in comparison. It's not just zeros and ones, folks. And all those digital and analog inputs made it easy to switch between sources. And comparing the A12's internal DAC to the one built into the Ever Solo streamer, I preferred the Ever Solo's more detailed presentation. But the A12's DAC is very smooth and balanced, allowing for long listening periods without fatigue. That old Burr Brown chip still can hold its own. However, there's no comparison to the Holo Audio DAC, which blows away every DAC I've tested against it in my system. Connecting the A12 Classic to the Maggies and using its internal DAC and phono preamp, I immediately noticed the ample power along with clarity and articulation. While it lacked the low-frequency vivacity and vigor of the Bryston, the crucial mid-range was expressive and refined, and the high frequencies are presented in a manner that is airy and smooth. If you own a turntable and enjoy playing records, the phono preamp in the A12 is impressive and not a weak spot as I had anticipated. My Lin LP12 with an Audio-Technica low-output moving coil cartridge, and with the A12 gain switch set to high, provided plenty of volume and clarity. I did some vinyl shootouts between different versions of the same album, and the differences were clear as day with the A12. And compared to the excellent moving coil phono stage in my Exposure integrated amp, I couldn't easily differentiate between the two. I believe the A12's performance with records will satisfy most vinyl enthusiasts. You can always add an external preamp or three. It has plenty of inputs. Headphone users. Often the built-in headphone amp in many integrated amplifiers is just a checkbox feature. Surely the headphone amp can't be that great, right? Well, yes it can. My Sennheiser HD650 sounds amazing through the A12, with plenty of volume, clarity, and dynamics. They just don't recommend that you use it with some electrostatics. Now this begs the question, is there something the A12 doesn't do well? That's the thing. Enthusiasts who are hard to impress may have low expectations for some of the features included in modern amps and receivers, like the internal DAC, phono stage, and headphone amplifier. Advanced Paris exceeded my expectations by incorporating a good quality, good sounding DAC, phono stage, and headphone amplifier. These features make a real difference. And you don't have to assume that you need to go and invest in separate peripherals to be satisfied. All the 2-channel receivers and amplifiers I've used over the years have 3 or 4 analog inputs and 2 or 3 digital ones. The A12 has 8 analog inputs and 12 digital. For the life of me, I can't think of a scenario where I or anyone would need to use all those digital inputs, but okay. I've seen a few online opinions stating that the Advanced Paris amplifiers are McIntosh killers on the cheap. I'm always skeptical when someone refers to a new product as a killer of a more established and popular one. Oops. As nice as the A12 Classic is, it doesn't quite match the construction quality of a McIntosh. To pack in so many features while keeping the price reasonable, I believe Advanced Paris had to limit spending on internal parts and casework, which are often the most expensive components. The front of the A12 is acrylic, not glass, and the rest is made of a thin, stamped, and bent steel rather than thick CNC machined aluminum. Despite all this, it's still a killer amplifier, just not maybe a McIntosh killer. This is an audacious, old-school, big and bulky amplifier, especially when many manufacturers are opting for sleek and more compact designs. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, This isn't the type of component I typically seek out. However, after using the A12 Classic for an extended period of time, my perspective has shifted. I've really grown to appreciate the A12 and its capabilities. The functionality and features are so well executed that I could easily see myself using it long term. If you're seeking a 2-channel solution that will sit imposingly on your shelf, look badass, sound fantastic, and accommodate a plethora of peripherals, then the Advanced Paris A12 Classic could be for you. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Be sure to check out the links below, including our My Own Devices Patreon, if you'd like to support my work in this exciting yet costly pastime. And as always, don't forget to have fun with your own devices. See you next time.